Hello and welcome to Tech 5, 5 technology stories that I think you should know about. And who am I? I'm Sean Thuris, a software developer in the San Francisco Bay Area where I run a small technology consultancy. Story number 1. A major AWS outage. A major outage in Amazon's cloud computing network Tuesday severely disrupted services at a wide range of US companies for more than 5 hours. Amazon Web Services is one of the 3 big public clouds, including Google Cloud Platform and Microsoft's Azure service. AWS is as big as the other 2 of them put together, and a lot of the apps and services that you use each day depend on AWS for at least some of their functionality. And in fact, the person who ran AWS, Andy Jassy, is now the CEO of Amazon. So during this outage, Netflix saw a 26% drop in traffic. Customers trying to book or change trips with Delta Airlines had trouble connecting. That's because their phone bank is actually run through AWS. So it's a voice over IP service that AWS offers, which allows Delta not to have to lease all of those phone lines. But in return, there's the possibility that if the server goes down, then it's more than one phone line being cut. Southwest Airlines switched over to West Coast servers, so their IT people had planned ahead and had this backup plan to move to other data centers in case the ones that were affected were affected. So Amazon took several days to make a statement about this, and they came out with this, which I won't read all of this to you, but some of it is interesting. So the event happened in their region that they call US East 1. That's in Virginia. They have US East 2 that's in Ohio, and then they have various other ones elsewhere around the world. So the interesting thing about this outage is that in a way it was similar to the Facebook outage that we saw a couple of months ago. So if I recall correctly, with the Facebook outage, their internal tools all relied on their own internal network, and when the addressing for the internal network was thrown off, they were no longer able to monitor anything that was happening in their servers. The difference here is that the AWS tools remained in contact with the services that they were trying to monitor, but something was wrong in the internal tools, such that the tools believed that they needed to redouble their efforts, essentially. So they were scaled up far too much. And the result of that is that it caused congestion within AWS as well as in their internal tooling. And because their internal tools were so backed up, an automated activity to scale capacity of one of the AWS services hosted in the main AWS network triggered an unexpected behavior from a large number of clients inside the internal network. If that sounds rather opaque, it does to me too. They're being very vague, and there must be some reason they're being this vague. Maybe it's a behavior of their tools that could be somehow exploited from outside in the manner of a DDoS attack. Their tools could be convinced that they needed more horsepower, essentially. They needed to commandeer more resources to monitor the AWS services. This resulted in a large surge of connection activity that overwhelmed the networking devices between the internal network and the main AWS network, resulting in delays for communication. And so this essentially snowballed. In any case, this went on for most of the day for a few services and for 4 hours for many services. And then here's a discussion of the post that we just looked at. And it mentions here, downtime can hurt the perception that cloud infrastructure is reliable and ready to handle migrations from physical data centers. Well, it is a physical data center. It's called the cloud because it's somebody else's problem. It's not your physical data center that you have to provide power to and backup generators and physical security and changing out hard drives on a regular basis and so on. That's somebody else's problem. It's just as physical a data center as any of the older, say, rack space or server farms from the 2000s or the 2010s. it says that for most of Tuesday, employees were unable to scan packages or access delivery routes at some of Amazon's warehouses and delivery areas. Amazon says that they're going to update their service health dashboard so that people can more quickly see what's going on. And this is the service health dashboard. These are all the services that Amazon Web Services offers. Although the list is lengthened by listing separately each of the data center areas, because they don't necessarily have one data center in one spot. They may have two or more close to each other. They don't like to reveal exactly where these things are. But I will just page through this list so you can see. Cognito, DynamoDB, Elastic Kubernetes, EventBridge, GameLift, Glacier, Lex. Here are some services I've never heard of. Managed Grafana, Massey, Neptune, Poly, that's a text-to-speech service, Quantum Ledger database, and so on. So I'll speed up. And so you can imagine each one of these services has at least some customers. A lot of our digital infrastructure depends on AWS staying up and available. So the CEO of Oracle, Larry Ellison, said, Oracle's cloud never ever goes down. He said, Oracle's cloud never goes down. We can't say that about any of the other clouds, which is true. The Google Cloud has had problems. Microsoft's Azure has had problems. AWS has had problems more than once. But Oracle's cloud service is much smaller. They have far fewer customers. To my knowledge, it's a good service, and it's offered at a decent price. But there's a network effect. Being able to access these various different functions under one dashboard, essentially. It doesn't matter whether they're in one data center or spread across the world. Well, it matters a little bit for the latency, the time that it takes a signal to go from Seattle to Johannesburg or something. But other than that, it doesn't matter that they're under one roof. What does matter is that they're under one dashboard where they can be administered as a set of services by one person or a team. Whereas if you have some services running with one cloud and some running with another and some on your own servers in your business, it's quite a bit more complicated. So usually businesses end up going with one cloud or primarily with one cloud with a few other services on the side, and businesses that are really serious about having their services remain up all the time will essentially duplicate everything they have in their main cloud in a second cloud and simply keep that on a sort of a pilot light. The services are there, they're available, it's costing them maybe a few dollars a day. But if they should need to switch over, then they would be requisitioning a bunch of servers and services from that other cloud in a hurry. And of course, that's part of what makes cloud services desirable, is that you can ask for essentially boundless resources at a moment's notice, or at least in an hour's notice or a day's notice. So it's easier for Oracle to not have these outage events because they don't have as many customers. They don't offer as many services. However, he says that they have gone with a strategy of building a large number of smaller, less expensive data centers, and that this strategy improves reliability because one data center going down will not result in a widespread outage. And that's true. Amazon and Google and Microsoft, with their relatively fewer data centers, but particularly with AWS, they're able to take advantage of economies of scale in this case, build a monstrous data center, Or you build a couple of them, or maybe 3 of them, and you treat them sort of as one logical unit. And you can save money versus building a bunch of different separately administered data centers. Anyway, that's that story. If you do run into an outage on some service, if you can't reach a website, for example, you can go to Down Detector and see what the latest reports are. So for example, we see it looks like people were reporting T-Mobile problems. So you can click through to this page and you can see there were 79 reports, 89 reports at this time, 102 reports at this time, people saying that they were having trouble either accessing the site or for loading or something. Anyway, story number 2, the DART spacecraft. NASA has launched a spacecraft that's going to propel itself into a small asteroid. The double asteroid redirection test will demonstrate a possible way to deflect asteroids that could pose a threat to Earth sometime in the future. So this was launched and it's on its way. It's headed for this Dimorphos asteroid that orbits around Didymos, this larger asteroid. So the asteroid that it's going to bump into is about the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And here's the spacecraft itself. So the way that this works is that it only takes a small bump into an object in space to throw it off course. If there's an asteroid that we think is headed for Earth and we see it a year out, if we can just deflect its path by a fraction of a degree per week, that's probably plenty to keep it from posing a threat to the Earth. So there are various ways to do this. You could place a thruster on the body and have it just gradually apply a vector and send it off on its way. You could run into it with this. Or another one that's really interesting, if it's a smaller object, you could put a large spaceship near it, and the mass of the spaceship will, through gravitational attraction, pull that object off course over time. So you'd have to sort of ride alongside of it for quite a while, but eventually you could pull it out of its trajectory. Something really interesting about this is the engine that it uses. It uses a xenon ion engine, and NASA put up this helpful video showing how it works. An atom of xenon is released, and then an electron, and in this powerful magnetic field inside the engine, that atom is ionized, it shoots out the back, then there's an extra electron, and that ends up being sent out of this, and that way the engine doesn't end up with too many extra electrons. And so they've developed this engine. It takes a good amount of electricity, thus the large solar panels on the side of the ship. And here's a picture of it being tested on Earth. And this looks like an artist's conception. This looks like but this is actually what it looks like. And that's pretty neat. Story number 3. Alexa.com is going out of business. If you've never heard of Alexa.com, that probably means you're not a web marketer. This is a site that since 1996 has tracked the relative popularity of websites, and marketers rely on it to know sort of who's up and who's down. The reason that they have to shut down, as far as I can tell, is that they relied on the installation of this Alexa toolbar in your browser, and that way they would track the activity of users who had this toolbar. Well, I've never installed it. Probably few of you have ever installed it, and therefore it's only people and therefore it was only tracking the activity of people who wanted to install this toolbar. Now, by contrast, a company like Cloudflare, that's a content delivery network, so that they basically serve files that maybe you don't want to be bothered serving. Photos, videos, and so forth that are part of your website, but you don't want the hassle of having them on your server and trying to pass them out to everyone around the world. Cloudflare has servers all over, and so they probably have a server much closer to your site visitor accessing your site from Dubai or wherever. Anyway, Cloudflare also has a DNS service, so they see a lot of traffic passing through. And they have this service. There's more detail available than just the top 15, but they show which sites are the most popular here. They also have some other stuff here. As always, the links to everything that I show you will be in the pinned comment. Here's an interesting one. 45% of all internet traffic is not humans. And this shows some attacks, where they start, where they go. So attacks of Germany against the US, the UK against the US, and so forth. Not as state actors, but as, well, in some cases. Not in most cases. In any event, let's not get stuck on the Cloudflare page. There's also this service called Tranco, and I've pulled up a few different sites here. So we have Netflix is typically either the fourth most popular, the third, or the second most popular. Then we have Instagram, which stays pretty steady here at 7. I don't think I saw another reading besides 7. So that's the 7th most popular. I looked up some other things just off the top of my head. Yahoo and Amazon here trade places pretty frequently. They all sit around 20th most popular. Spotify sits here around 60th. Varies a little bit. Probably by the day of the week, I would guess. There are usually weekly patterns in many internet metrics. Then we have TikTok, which I'm surprised is this low because it seems to be everywhere, no matter whether you want to see it or not. Then we have NBC.com down at 1600th. And then the Daily Oklahoman, which is the newspaper in Oklahoma City, is maybe a sort of a typical website. Gets a lot of visitors, has a lot of content, but it's 12,000th in the grand scheme of things. These sites in the top, well, probably several hundred, are transacting a lot of data. They're very busy. Story number 4. The newly identified hormone Fabkin. So, regarding biology and medical stories, I try not to cover the in mice and in vitro type stories, where the headline is, scientists suggest that huge breakthrough could be just over the horizon. Because many of these things don't pan out. Well, I should actually say few of these things pan out. But I'll make an exception here. This is something that's been worked on for close to 20 years now. I looked at some of the old papers on this sort of subfield of endocrinology. And the scientists who did this study have a lot of experience in this particular area. To sum it up, there's a relationship between fat in the body and the pancreas producing insulin. It's not just blood sugar. And as they've explored this further, it's a very interesting mechanism that they've discovered. This substance called fatty acid binding protein number 4, or FABP4, is secreted from fat cells when they are giving up some of their fat into the bloodstream. And it says numerous studies have shown correlations between circulating FABP4 and metabolic diseases, including obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. And that is a direct correlation, not an inverse correlation. So that is, you don't want this, essentially. You don't want this FABP4 circulating in your blood in any quantity. It doesn't say it here, and I won't go through all the other pages that I looked at to figure this out, but essentially there's a substance called PPAR gamma in the islets in your pancreas that's necessary in small amounts for the beta cells to do their thing and make insulin. If that PPAR gamma is not around, they won't function. They won't do it. And so this FABP4 and fatty acids in the blood tend to repress that PPAR. And so now they've figured out that this FABP4 has this very strong suppressive effect on it. And it says, when researchers used an antibody to neutralize Fabkin in mice, the animals did not develop diabetes. When the antibody was given to obese diabetic mice, they reverted to a healthy state. So this is just in mice, but this seems like it could really be quite important. And I'll just leave it there rather than getting, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but that's a pretty exciting development. All right, story number 5, and this is a quick one. Apple reaches quiet truce over iPhone privacy changes. Apple has said that if you don't want to be tracked, you can just click a button in your settings and you won't be tracked, essentially. In May, Apple launched an advertisement that featured a harassed man whose daily activities were closely monitored. When his iPhone prompted him, ask app not to track, he clicked it and they all vanished. The message was clear: if you choose an iPhone, you're choosing privacy. But 7 months later, companies including Snap and Facebook have been allowed to keep sharing user-level signals from iPhones as long as the data is anonymized and aggregated. So this is a trend that's been coming, this in response really to GDPR and other privacy supporting legislation that's come in California and elsewhere. The advertisers now say, well, we don't need to know your name and your height and your shoe size. We just need to know that you go in the bin with people who, say, like to shop at Target, or the bin of people who respond well to nonprofits, appeals for funds, and so on. The problem here is that to get your data from your phone that's easily identifiable as your phone into this hopper with all of these people with whom you're anonymized, it has to actually be taken as that data from your phone, and then you have to trust that whoever has taken that data is going to anonymize it. And that's the crux of the problem here. Snap has told investors that it plans to share data from its 300 million users, including those who ask Snap not to track them, so that advertisers can, quote, gain a more complete real-time view on how ad campaigns are working. So personally identifiable data will be obfuscated and aggregated, but they're still tracking you as a collection of descriptors, basically. The idea is at least an improvement on wanting to know where you live and wanting to know your address and what car you drive and so forth, but you can easily identify someone with just a few signals. For example, in 2007 or 2009, there was a study that showed that just from a handful of Netflix ratings, you can tell who it is, because they have to have watched the same movies and they have to have given this one 5 and this one 4 and this one 3, for example. And the same goes for if you know that a person's zip code and their date of birth and maybe a couple of other things about them, you can get a very good chance of guessing from out of a pool who that person is. So Apple has told developers they may not derive data from a device for the purpose of uniquely identifying it. That means they can observe signals from an iPhone at a group level. But again, this means that that specific data does have to go into their pipeline at some point, and they just have to promise that they won't use it until they've sort of stripped away the personally identifying aspect, or the device identifying aspect. A company called Lockdown Privacy has called Apple's policy functionally useless in stopping third-party tracking. They said that personal data and device information is still being sent to trackers in almost all cases. So I will come back next week with another privacy story. Until then, thank you for joining me. Please let me know what you thought of the various stories, what you'd like me to cover, what you're tired of me covering, and I'll see you next time.